Now, more often than not, video games based on movies come across as a lazy attempt to squeeze out extra cash from consumers. However, you can understand why studios keep pumping them out. Because the demand is clear, you can see why gaming companies are eager to churn out movie tie-ins. But because there have been so many film-based games over the years, more than a few have slipped through the cracks. Even if you consider yourself a gaming fanatic, you probably hadn't a clue that there are games based on Little Nicky, Sharknado, and Dirty Dancing. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movie games that everybody missed. Number 10. Vertigo. Just because a movie is hailed as a masterpiece doesn't exactly mean that it deserves a video game tie-in. I mean, could you imagine playing an open-world title based on Gone with the Wind or The Shawshank Redemption or Goodfellas? Actually, a Goodfellas game would be awesome now that I think about it. So when a game inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's classic thriller Vertigo was revealed at E3 in 2021, the gaming community wondered how such an adaptation would actually work. Well, the answer, it turns out, was simple, and that was by changing every aspect of the story and all of the characters. In fact, this adventure title only shares one similarity with the film, and that's that both protagonists suffer from vertigo. If it wasn't advertised as Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, you wouldn't know that this game was associated with the 1958 classic. But the question is it any good? Unfortunately not, because the gameplay focuses on uncreative quick-time events and searching for pixel-sized clues. Vertigo is more likely to put you to sleep rather than keep you on the edge. Even though the previews generated a bit of buzz at E3, Alfred Hitchcock Vertigo made such a minuscule ripple upon launch that many gamers are still totally unaware of its existence. Number 9. Little Nicky. Now, let's face it, Little Nicky is a god-awful comedy starring Adam Sandler. To be honest, that doesn't actually narrow it down, so let's try that again. Little Nicky is actually a movie where Satan's goofy son Nicky ventures to Earth to stop his demonic brothers from wreaking havoc on humanity, leading to all sorts of predictable and cringy hijinks. Although Sandler has made a lot of unwatchable crud, Little Nicky is amongst some of his worst. It bombed spectacularly at the box office and was ripped apart by critics. Because of the universally negative reception Little Nicky received, it's hard to think of a single thing in Sandler's repertoire less deserving of a video game tie-in. And yet, Digital Eclipse and Ubisoft joined forces in 2000 to create a platformer based on Little Nicky for the Game Boy Color. But what's more bizarre is that the game in question is actually pretty decent. Because you don't have to endure dumb dialogue or Sandler's hammy acting, this platformer is far superior to the movie it's based on. It's nothing special, but the catchy tunes, varied level design, and diverse combat system are sure to keep players entertained for at least a little while. Number 8. Sharknado, the video game. Now, the first time you heard the title Sharknado, you probably had the same thought as everybody else. How is this a real movie? But not only is Sharknado a real feature, the story of a tornado shooting out sharks spawned 4 sequels. Recognizing Sharknado as the money-making franchise it is, Other Ocean Interactive released a video game adaptation only a year after the original's release called Sharknado, the video game. Yes, you can tell they put as much effort into the title as the filmmakers did with the movie. And Sharknado, the video game, is an endless runner for mobiles, where the player must dash, surf, and ride sharks in order to survive. Due to its reliance on microtransactions, repetitive level design, imprecise controls, and monotonous music, you are guaranteed to turn this garbage off after even a few minutes. Because of Sharknado's ludicrous title and premise, though, it's obvious that it was meant to be entertainingly bad. But if that was Sharknado, the video game's intention, it failed miserably since it's just the conventional kind of bad. Number 7. Days of Thunder. Upon its release, Days of Thunder was praised for its action and special effects. But what really made Tony Scott's blockbuster stand the test of time was the solid writing, compelling performances, and palpable chemistry between the actors. Without any of these elements, Days of Thunder just simply wouldn't have worked. Sadly, none of those elements are here in the 2011 racer Days of Thunder NASCAR Edition, which was released for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. This time around, there's no banter between Tom Cruise and Robert Duvall's character, no love story, absolutely nothing. Because Days of Thunder had nothing unique to separate it from other races like Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, or Burnout, it made zero splash when it was released. In fact, it made such a small impact that only one critic even bothered to review the PS3 port. Although this version was regarded as average at best, Days of Thunder on the Xbox 360 was a whole other disaster. Due to the oversensitive controls and erratic vehicle physics, this port received a pitiful score of 25% on Metacritic. Simply put, stay well away from this car wreck. Number 6. Mean Girls. In 2009, Crush Digital Media intended to release a Nintendo DS title based on the teen comedy Mean Girls. And if you haven't heard of this game, well, that's because it doesn't exist. Well, at least not until recently. You see, just as the developers were putting the final touches on the Mean Girls video game tie-in, the whole project was abruptly cancelled. And as far as the gaming public was concerned, the Mean Girls game was gone for good. But then something happened that was so surreal it sounds like an urban legend. You see, in 2021, YouTuber Raven Simone received a near-complete file of Mean Girls for the DS through an anonymous email. After a programmer called Tommy's Shadow eliminated most of the bugs, the formerly lost game was officially playable. And what did we get in the end? Well, it was actually a pretty fun puzzle game with a wide variety of minigames. Yes, there are still a few glitches, especially with the music, but it's clear that this adaptation did not deserve the chop. Even if it was terrible, it's still commendable how a small but devoted community worked together to ensure that the Mean Girls video game finally saw the light of day. Number 5. Dragon Ball Evolution. After watching the Dragon Ball Evolution film, you'd swear that this live-action adaptation was tailor-made to insult anime fans and personally destroy your childhood. So if you feel like this abomination tainted the beloved manga series, you should probably definitely keep well away from the PSP beat-em-up that it spawned, which is also called Dragon Ball Evolution. Now, at first, you'd assume that the game can't be all that bad, right? I mean, after all, it was developed by Dimps, the same team behind several entries in the well-received fighting franchise Dragon Ball Shin Budokai. And because Evolution has the same engine, gameplay, rush attacks, and commands as Budokai, there's no logical reason why it should fall short. Well, the good news is that the PSP tie-in isn't as bad as the movie, although saying that that's not exactly hard. Having a hernia is actually more enjoyable than watching that crap fest. But because of the abysmal controls and dire AI, Dragon Ball Evolution is a serious contender for the worst PSP game ever. And since the character designs are all based on their movie counterparts, you'll be constantly reminded of that awful film during your playthrough. Even if you love the Budokai installments, you should definitely give this dud a wide berth. Number 4. White Men Can't Jump. Now, no one is going to blame you if you haven't heard of the White Men Can't Jump video game. Not only was it irredeemably terrible, it was only available on the Atari Jaguar, which is a console that basically nobody bought. To its credit, this tie-in game really does try to emulate the feel of the movie. While the player is dribbling or dunking, the character constantly trash-talk each other to throw them off their game. Even though this is a neat idea, you'll have heard every single soundbite the game has to offer after playing just a single match. Once you hear the same insult dozens of times, you'll want to put this on mute. Then there are all the other reasons this dumpster fire just doesn't work. The graphics are blocky, the animations are janky, and the controls are unresponsive. However, it's the camera perspective that turns this mediocre game into unbearable drivel. The way the camera keeps swooping back and forth will leave you too dizzy to even carry on. Not only is White Men Can't Jump one of the weakest games on the Jaguar, it's arguably one of the worst basketball games ever. Number 3. Dirty Dancing. Do you know what makes less sense than making a video game based on Dirty Dancing? Making a video game based on Dirty Dancing 20 years after it was released. Even though interest for the classic rom-com wasn't exactly through the roof in 2007, Codemasters thought that this was the perfect time to churn out a Dirty Dancing game for the PC. Because of the flashlight graphics, you can tell this unnecessary movie tie-in is going to suck from the get-go. But you, my friend, cannot comprehend just how bad this game is. Although dancing should be the story's selling point, the dance club is actually closed off at first. To unlock the tango, the mambo, or the samba, you must work as a hotel receptionist, a stagehand, a waiter, and a melon transporter. As tedious as these minigames are, you'll feel obligated to keep it up purely just to get to the dancing. So yeah, 2 thumbs down. Number 2. 7 Samurai 20XX. 7 Samurai centers around a group of washed-up warriors who are hired to protect a village from bandits. Despite the straightforward plot, 7 Samurai is often regarded as the pinnacle of cinema, mainly due to Akira Kurosawa's influential filming techniques. But during the millennium, several game developers looked at this masterpiece and thought, you know what this story needs? Robots, mutants, and more robots. And that's probably how 7 Samurai 20XX for the PS2 came to be. Rather than maintaining the realistic aesthetic of the source material, this hack and slash has our sword-wielding septet facing cybernetic creatures in post-apocalyptic Project Tokyo. Basically, it has next to nothing in common with the film it's based on. And also, if the developers are going to use the Seven Samurai title, why are the 7 characters referred to as hunters instead of samurai? But what about the game itself? Well, considering that you're battling monsters and robots, the gameplay, it's surprisingly boring due to the uncreative level design and repetitive battles. Even though there's a complex combo system here, you can vanquish foes easily by just pressing the same button over and over. Although the film has cemented itself in the annals of history, Seven Samurai 20XX, well, it's been deservingly forgotten. And number 1, Home Alone, the 2007 version. Home Alone was such a box office hit that every gaming studio tried to capitalize on the hype. Within a few years, there was a Home Alone game on almost every system, including the NES, the SNES, the Mega Drive, Game Boy, Game Gear, and Master System. If you were brought up with this beloved comedy, then you should be familiar with at least one of these titles. But even though some of these ports were surprisingly fun, the majority of them were unimaginative and laborious. However, none of them were as epically shoddy as the PS2 version, which was simply called Home Alone. Now, even before you experience the gameplay on offer here, you know this game is going to be trash, purely because of the amateur work on the loading screens. I mean, seriously, these pictures look like they were drawn in Microsoft Paint. In the game itself, you must unlock doors and hurl dynamite and flour at burglars to complete each level, which might not seem so bad at first, but it becomes monotonous when you realize that that is all this game has to offer. Because 2007's Home Alone was barely reviewed and never released outside of America, you can understand why the majority of gamers have never heard of this absolute catastrophe. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 movie video games everybody missed. I hope you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Instagram, where it's @RetroJ, but the O is A0. Hope to see you over there, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.